So, welcome back to another episode of Out of the Bubble podcast. My name is Rachel Peru, and today's episode comes with a trigger warning. We are going to be talking and covering some really sensitive subjects, including child abuse, a lifetime of abuse, and sexual abuse. And if this is something that's going to really trigger you, then please make sure that you're in a safe environment and you listen to it in your own time. But it does come with a trigger warning. Today, we are joined by Louise Chamberlain, and Claire is somebody that I've recently come across, and her story is such an inspiring. She has overcome so much, and when she finally did manage to get through the trauma, when she did seek help, there wasn't help available. So she has created her own system of healing, and she's now sharing it with so many others. And her story is so powerful, and she's got so much to offer other people and trauma victims, and she is doing some incredible work to help other survivors. So I'm really honoured to have Claire share her story with me today. So good morning, Claire. Lovely to see you this morning.
Good morning, Rachel. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Friday, glad it's nearly the weekend.
Oh, I know. It's half term for us next week as well, so some well-deserved time off with the small people to do some quality time.
Good, sounds like a plan. I mean, you and I have met kind of fairly recently, really, through social media again, and I love these connections that we've made. And I think, your story and your personality and what the work you're doing now has really kind of, I've been really drawn to you, and I think you're so inspiring and you've got so much to help other people with. But it's hard to know where to start. So for people that might not know anything about you, what's your how do you introduce yourself to people?
Well, I'll just say, first of all, it's funny you say that because you've got such a positive energy that I also was drawn to the second. And it's almost like I think that's why we decided to personally speak on this level immediately as soon as we sort of connected. But so I introduced myself as Claire. I'm a survivor of childhood trauma and abuse, and subsequently domestic abuse. And the reason I say subsequently is because the two are very much intertwined. There are lots of cause and effect aspect to that. And what I identify as is a human being who was reaching out for support, having escaped my last and final abuser, and coming across a lot of brick walls, really, and a lot of closed doors because of legal reasons and legislation and waiting lists, and being unable to cope with daily life and the struggles and the traumas that had been inflicted upon me. And so what I then went on to do is try and figure my way through it. I had an epiphany, really, that no one was coming to save me. There wasn't going to be a Disney moment with a dude in tights, and that the people that I did have in my life left after the flying monkeys and the isolation and triangulation have their own lives and their own children, and they couldn't drop everything to fix me, and the only person that could do it was me. And then basically going out and exploring on Google, because where else do you go, and trying to find ways to heal and ways to cope initially with my symptoms, which were panic attacks and, lots of different nightmares and night terrors and flashbacks, and just really, really hard to cope with physical symptoms after lots of trauma. And the very real obstacles, it was the discovery, I think, of the obstacles that I faced and my determination to get through them in order to be able to parent effectively. It wasn't necessarily about me healing in the beginning, it was about me being able to support my children who would have been affected too. And realizing actually that a huge and vast majority of the healing advice online and the imagery and the help out there was either ridiculously expensive, when 8 out of 10 of us have been financially abused, or it was surrounded and sort of swamped with this imagery of perfection. And you're faced with a situation where you're not washing, your house is an absolute shed, you are on the floor, floored physically by panic attacks, and flashbacks and things like that. And yet you're seeing, when you type in healing and well-being into Google and attempting to you type in panic attacks into Google and how to get over, how to ground, how to meditate, how to do all this. And there's these beautiful images of, super skinny women meditating on mountaintops in the Himalayas or at Buddhist retreats, spa days with fluffy robes and cucumbers on your eyes, and just how can anybody that's in a position of basically laying in a puddle of their own snot and tears relate to that? And it very much, I think that's one of the reasons we've come together, because it's very much the same, that image of perfection that no real person can truly relate to. And that's when I started sharing what I'd learned, and that's when I put the 4 cornerstones together in a way that actually, instead of pretending those obstacles aren't there, let's use them as stepping stones to get to where we need to go. These obstacles are a real thing. Let's acknowledge it. I'm not telling you that you'll feel better for going out and having a walk and smiling, because yeah, while there's some truth in that, you've got to get out the door, and we all know the mountain that's in the way of that small task, seemingly small task, to survivors and people with mental health issues. So that's me. That was a really long introduction, wasn't it?
No, it was brilliant. And you know what I really love is the fact that I've talked to quite a few people that have overcome some really major traumas and hurdles through their life, but it's then your willingness to share what you've learned to others that has such a big impact on other people. I think that's, you know, so commendable, and I really kind of admire the fact that you are out there sharing this message. And I completely relate to what you're saying about the self-care, because, you know, you're talking about basics here. You're talking about getting back to basics, and it is a million miles away from the images that we're constantly fed on social media and advertising about, you know, self-care. So we have got a lot to talk about today. I mean, sharing kind of the backstory, I guess, is a great place to start, to get people to understand kind of what you've been through to get to where you are now. You know, where do you start with that?
I know. So I always start with, and it seems kind of, I think it seems a little bit backwards, but I start with the day that I called Women's Aid, because a lot of us, having had a lot of control taken away from us in our lives, it's not just survivors, this is a lot of people are very nervous about calling an outsider when it comes to mental health or personal issues. Doctors, you know, trying to enlist for NHS mental health support, trying to reach out to a service that helps us, like, you know, people that have thought about, you know, trigger warning suicide, but people that thought about ending their lives, you know, ringing Samaritans. And there's a huge amount of, I think, British culture norms around stiff upper lips and sweeping things under the carpet. And that's the reason I start where I do, because my life began when I reached out for help. And while I couldn't get professional mental health support, Women's Aid were incredible. Women's Aid do a course, they provide a course called Freedom, and it's a 12-week course. And I will say this right now while I'm here, anybody that has been through any kind of intimate partner violence, domestic abuse in their life, it can have happened 6 years ago, and you're eligible to go on the Freedom course for free. Local Women's Aid, find the number, ring them, go along, because what they do is they teach you about perpetrator behavior, about why that happened, how it happened, and it teaches you essentially that it wasn't your fault. What you didn't do anything to bring this on, and this is what these sort of people are, and that's how they live. You know, and it's something that I sat there, having been through my entire life, feeling like I've been told on various occasions. I thought I'd had a good childhood. I thought I'd had a privileged childhood because I'd been taken on holidays. I had gone to a grammar school. I'd ridden horses. I'd had hobbies. I had had friends and gone to parties and had a relative amount of freedom in that respect. And I thought that I had a strenuous relationship, specifically with my dad. And I thought that my mum was a victim of him and that she needed help. That was the frame of my childhood in my head. And then I went to Women's Aid, and I knew, when I say victim, I thought he was quite bossy with my mum. I thought he was quite controlling with my mum. Never ever used the word abusive in my head. My head didn't go to that. It was, she always has to live under his rules. And I went through life walking into relationships of very similar ilk. And anyway, and then I went to Women's Aid after a particularly horrendous relationship with the father of my 2 youngest children. And they taught us perpetrator behaviours, Rachel, and I sat there and just for the first time in my life realised that my dad was my first perpetrator, because every single character trait, it wasn't like 27 out of the 33 traits, it was every single one and every single incident mirrored my childhood experience.
Mm.
And it was a genuinely life-shattering moment for me. And that's where this story starts, because
Yeah.
I could start with my childhood, but actually while I was living that childhood, I thought I was the problem. I was hysterical. I had mental health issues. I made mountains out of molehills. I was a liar and I remembered things wrong all the time. I was a troublemaker, Rachel, you know?
Mm.
And every decision I made was wrong. And I was super clumsy and literally couldn't get anything right. And I needed my parents to cuckold me and make my life okay.
Mm.
And actually, can I swear on your show?
Of course you can. Yeah.
It was absolute bullshit, my friend. So
Yeah.
it was such a mirage that was put over me to be able to control and manipulate me, because I was the loud one in the family and I was the one that questioned my dad's narratives, and that's not okay. So long story short, that's where my story starts, and that's when I started journaling on the advice of the lady from Women's Aid, and I started to look at my childhood experiences in a different light, and the extent of the abuse and manipulation was quite horrendous. There were incidents. I've got an example that I talk about actually on my workshop, and it's because the woman that was facilitating the Women's Aid course, told me about a time when one of her survivors had been convinced by her perpetrator that an apple was the colour orange and an orange was the colour green by her partner. And they convinced her of that over a period of time at home so well that when she went out in public, she would point at it, he'd say, "What colour's that?" And she'd say, "Orange." And then he'd perpetuate the myth to all of his friends that, "Oh, she's a psycho, what I've got to deal with at home." And I was doing some journaling and I was talking to my friend, actually. This was a couple of years ago. I was having a chat on the phone with a friend, a video call. And I was talking to them because this is what's happened as well. I talk about memories as a child, like a lot of people do. You talk about childhood memories,
yeah,
and you share experiences. And I start talking about something that I thought was a normal memory, and then suddenly find out that there was trauma in it, and it's constantly popping up in my life. It's like, surprise.
Yeah.
And in this case, I was talking to my friend and said, "Oh, I went to visit London once, actually, because she was talking about London with my parents when I was a teenager." And a couple of weeks before I'd been, Rachel, to London, I was working at a local theme park on one of those shacks, £1, come and play the game.
Yeah.
And it was a basketball game. And this grown man, I was 16 years old, and this grown man had approached me in a romantic way. And I had 16-year-oldly told him to bog off, like really sharply, because I was a young girl. And he paid £1 for a basketball and he'd thrown it point blank at my nose and broke it.
Oh, God.
It exploded all over my face. He lost his temper, threw it at me, and the security guards sorted it all out and everything. And I went home, but obviously I had slightly black eyes and a bit of a swollen nose when I went to London. And they weren't black. They were by this point 2 weeks later, they were just dark, a little bit dark. But while we were there, I saw this amazing street artist. So when you watch movies and there's some guy sitting sketching people and they sit and it looks super romantic when couples have it done and sitting on the streets of London. And so I paid my my hard-earned money from my little job as a teenager to have my face sketched by this guy. And it was a huge piece of paper. I thought, oh, this is exciting. And my parents were wandering around in the area and stuff and came back, and I think as a child, as a young person, 16-year-old, I obviously had moved my face around while he was doing it because my nose was at a literal 45-degree angle. So the whole sketch was pretty accurate of my face, but my nose was like this. And I was telling my friend this, and I said about how upset I'd been, and how he'd really captured my wonky nose. So because obviously I'd had my nose broken the week before, and in my head at the time, is that what my nose looks like? Not, oh, he's got it wrong because I've moved my head around. I'm going, oh, my nose looks, oh my gosh, is that what my nose looked like? And I got very upset and I threw the picture away when I got back to the hotel. And when we all returned home, I was being dramatic. Obviously, my parents said I was being dramatic, etc. And we got back and they not only kept the picture, but they framed it in the front room. They kept it in the front room. And when I say I was very upset by this painting, I mean I was a 16-year-old girl with insecurities as everyone has. And I hated it. And they actually pointed it out to people when they came round, and I'd be like, oh, it shows my nose. And they told me I needed to get over it, and my nose looked like that now, and that was the way my face was, and what was my problem. And I basically over the course of the next few months and years, because it was up for a long time. I think it was still up when I went off to uni and then came back again. It was up for years in the front, in the living room. And it was a source of humour for everyone, an amusement when they came round, because people that were visiting didn't know the harm it was causing, of course.
Yeah.
And I went through my life then genuinely seeing in the mirror this 45-degree angle nose, and I had my nose broken, so how wonky was it? And I was telling my friend this story, but saying, and I know my nose, and I said to her, I know my nose is wonky, but it was really hurtful the way that they did that to me. Bearing in mind I was 35 when I had this conversation, Rachel, and she went, what? She went, what? And I went, well, I know my nose is really wonky down my face, but and carried on talking. And she said, no, and obviously you know that I paint. I like painting to heal. It's one of my things.
Yeah.
It's a helpful thing. And she said, use your artist measuring thumb. She said, I've seen you measure things. She said, go in the mirror right now and measure your face. I went, fine. And I got in the mirror, and at 35 years old, I realised that my nose didn't look anything like what I had been persuaded it had been for my... The coercive control and emotional abuse had persuaded my brain so convincingly that my face was different to what it actually was in the mirror.
Yeah.
I saw it every time I looked. I didn't whinge about it or go on about it. It's just my nose looked wonky down my face. And I spent the 20 more years of my life genuinely believing that that's what my face looked like.
Have you had an opportunity to express how you feel to your parents now?
Yeah, I mean, I offered what I wanted after realising all of this. What I did was approach them for family counselling, family therapy, because I had told them lots of time. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm quite a verbal person, actually. So I had expressed an upset and a dislike for behaviours my entire life. It's not like I was this shell or wallflower of a person that didn't say anything when people mistreated me. I never knew what abusive patterns were. I wasn't given the tools to know. I thought I deserved it because I was easily convinced that it was my fault these things were happening, but I did resist at the beginning. And with my parents, I went to my mum, because at the time still seeing her as an ally. And I said, my dad's a trigger for me. I'm having these awful things happen. This is really, really messing with my head. I really need to figure myself out right now. I'd like some space from him, but I'd really like to do family therapy so we can all talk about this stuff. And the reason I asked for family therapy is because every time I tried to talk to them about anything that they'd done or said that had impacted me, they'd gaslit me to persuade me that I was the problem. And having now been on the freedom course, I understood that. Yeah. And I understood what they'd done is they were reframing the conversation, and I wasn't going to get anywhere on my own without a medium, a person there to sort of like hold the conversation steady. And I offered that for quite a long time. I mean, at the same time, I'd escaped my abuser, a good few months before. There'd been an incident with the children, which this one I can talk about, where the children had been physically assaulted by my ex-partner. He's been cautioned for that, so that's something I can say. Yeah. And they came home with bruises and things, and there was supervised contact going on, and then towards the end of doing the freedom course, there was another disclosure made by one of my children that meant that they didn't have any contact with that person anymore. And I was obviously at that point dealing with a lot. I was dealing with a lot of emotional fallout from the breakup, from what had happened with the kids, from figuring out being a completely single parent with no respite. I mean, despite the fact that it's the right thing to do to stop contact when somebody's done something harmful to a child, that in its turn meant that me as a person healing from a lot of trauma had no childcare. I had no break, none of that single mum stuff where you get a weekend off or a day off every now and again. It's like, and then unfortunately, to uphold their narrative that I was the problem, my parents decided to stay in contact with that person instead of supporting me and the kids. And they've supported that person in trying to get contact because it's easier, isn't it, to uphold the narrative that I'm the problem and not have to work with my new boundaries and my new strength than it is to just pretend that I'm, I mean, I've been diagnosed with CPTSD, but they've convinced a lot of people in themselves that I've got schizophrenia and bipolar. I've got, professional diagnosis, and that's the narrative, because my illness is caused by trauma, whereas the other one can be caused by other things, so that can still be that I'm the problem. and I'm just, I'm an issue.
So how easy is it now to trust people after all that? Because you've been betrayed so much in life. How easy is it to then go and trust? And you are so open. That's what I love about you, but it's...
do you know what I realised? The key to this, I realised this about 1.5 years ago. And I often ask survivors, what's your biggest obstacle to healing? And they say, trust. And I say, who do you need to trust? And they say, the people around me. And I say, no. And the reason that I say no is because actually the key to this is being able to trust yourself. Because I was brought up without any of the tools to spot toxicity, abusive behaviour, to spot when somebody had bad intentions towards me. And I gave and gave and gave to people that really didn't deserve it. I never got anything back in return, or when I did get something back, it was conditional. There's so much going on. My toolkit to select the people around me was terrible. And what I say to my survivors and to anyone out there listening is that the person you need to trust most is you. You need to absolutely know and understand and hear your instincts. I had a lot of situations as a young person and a child, Rachel, where when the hairs go back up on your neck and you get that uncomfortable feeling and you're not happy about a situation that's happening to you or around you, and you say, I'm not happy about this, and people go, don't be silly. So you go, and I learned to shut up my instincts. And I don't need to know who to trust. I need to trust what my body and my brain and my heart tells me when I'm interacting with other people. And if I'm feeling happy, that means I can trust. And I only give out information that doesn't harm me. I only share what doesn't harm me. I only talk about these things because I absolutely know that there's someone else sitting there in the dark hole that I had to exist in for a long time on my own, who hearing these words might go, oh, there's a way out, and follow that light and get to their path. And that's why I'm here, because I can't live knowing that there are so many of us on 2-year waiting lists, for mental health support. And for me, I was on a 2-year waiting list, Rachel. Well, actually, sorry, that's not quite true. I was on an 11-month waiting list. And then when I finally did get my assessment, and I had my 4 assessments with a psychologist and everything else, and I got diagnosed and escalated to level 4 psychiatric requirements, on the same day I was discharged. And the reason I was discharged was because by that time there was a police investigation going on around us. And in the UK, if you're a witness to a police investigation around assault and abuse, counselling isn't allowed till after, it's not advised till after the court situation, because your witness testimony is classed as coached by a defence lawyer and gets thrown out. So I then had to wait even longer, and that's not just me. That's the thing. There's so many out there, and if anyone's in that position, I want you to know there is a way to manage those symptoms at home without it being classed as coached and without it being held against you, because you just feel unsafe to reach out to anyone because it's all recorded. And if I say this, then they'll think I'm crazy, and then I'll lose my kids. And if I say this, no one will believe me in court when I stand up against them. And it's what you're experiencing is perfectly natural and normal. And it is a human response to the things that have happened to you, and you're okay, and you can be okay again,
Yeah, and I think there's so much power in as a victim being able to speak out about that and share that, because you don't get the support that you need at the time that you need it. So therefore, you then had to go and search for it yourself. And where do you even start with that? Where did you start with your own kind of journey back to?
I started by ringing a friend when I thought I was having an actual heart attack. I thought I was dying. I am slightly lucky. I had a little bit of luck in that I had my first ever panic attack at the doctor's surgery. And the reason for that is because it wasn't long after a certain situation that I had with the kids. And basically I went for my smear test. And in that doctor's surgery, there was something about the curtains and the ceiling tiles and everything else that just gave me a huge flashback and a bit of a trigger. And I ended up fetus under the doctor's bed. I was like full on, like hiding under it, and I had to. It took them a while to get me out of there. I was a full on hedgehog. And so the nurse actually said, I think you're having an anxiety attack, because I said I'm dying. I can't breathe. I couldn't. The pain and the overwhelming, because it's a transference of emotional pain, isn't it? A panic attack. It's a transfer. It's that perceived risk that your brain does the base responses, but in real terms, it's a transference of emotional pain into physical pain to make you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
and good God, does it hurt?
Mm.
Jesus. So because she'd said that, at least I had a word to look up. So when I started having more and more of them, I was able to Google anxiety attack and then read that and think that's not quite right. What? And it, panic attack came up near it. So I was like, oh, what's that? And I am much like, can you remember the film Short Circuit? I'm a lot like Johnny Five, I'm Alive. I'm like more input, and I do like to wrap my head around something fully if I'm interested. I don't read one book, I read 100 books,
Knowledge is power, Claire.
Yes, that's absolutely, knowledge is power, 100%. Because as well, I'd been to this freedom course, and understanding perpetrator behavior and my codependency and emotional needs and everything else, and my lack of tools, that had given me something, because it gave me this thing where I understood that and it helped me cope with it better. So I think without realizing it, I knew that I needed to fully understand what was going on in here in order to do anything with it. Like, what is it first? What is a panic attack? And that's where I started. And literally, and it wasn't there from then, it was a very organic process, because it was what's the next thing to Google? And it was the next link that was there to click, and the next, reading and reading and reading, and then writing down in my journal if I found something useful. I'm going to try this. And I did try lots and lots of different things that didn't work. And this is why I call my project the Clear Path Project, because when you're in the dark, you will have a stab at anything to get out of it. It's like being stuck in a marshland or a big jungle, and you're trying to chop down because you can't see where you're going. You have no clue. And that's why it's the Clear Path Project, because this has been piloted now with hundreds and hundreds of survivors. It's not a reinvention of the wheel. It's not new and revolutionary. It's the same stuff, but made accessible to survivors with their mental health issues. It's made achievable and realistic and not ridiculous. It's not go and do this massive project. Go for a spa day, love. There's a whole running joke, isn't there? Is it Mumsnet or Net Mums?
Mumsnet.
Where they make a joke now about let's go for a spa day, because somebody's coming with this huge, massive life-altering problem, and it's like, go for a spa day. Stop it. Nobody should ever suggest a spa day to anyone ever again unless it's just for fun. That's it. Stop it. Doesn't fix anything.
No.
So I'm sorry to all the spas out there that are trying to sell spa days, but that's not they're great. They're absolutely fantastic, and if it's an option, yes, fantastic. But it isn't a healing tool in any way whatsoever.
That doesn't help the woman that can't physically move and get out of bed in the morning because she doesn't want to face the day.
I go to a spa and swimming when I haven't showered in 3 weeks. I haven't shaved my vagina area for like 14 months. I'm not going anywhere. So it's all that, isn't it? It's just there are so many obstacles that people haven't thought of, and I think because there's the unique combination of the fact that I went to a school that taught me to dig deeper, and I went to a grammar school and was taught to investigate things and really research things. Then I went to uni and learned the same. Then I went through a series of I was just about to say a series of unfortunate events. Let me stick it. And but I went through this life that felt uncontrollable, and found, and finally eventually found what things work for me, and just thought, well, if it works for me, that's it's not special. It doesn't mean it worked for anyone else. But just happening to share it when I was in support groups or with other survivors and saying, oh, this thing's really good, and then coming back and going, oh my God, that thing changed my life. You explaining it in that way. I'd never wanted to try it before. I'd never wanted to try meditation because it's it's woo woo, and all that. And I realized suddenly that I had something unique to bring to the table, and that's where Chamberlain Expressions was born, and the 4 cornerstones.
So how do you feel now about getting your message out there? Have you kind of stepped into this new role, because it is a new role for you, to become this almost, you're reinventing yourself in a really positive way and putting all that harrowing experience to something positive. How does that feel now? Is it empowering? Is it scary?
All of that. It's do you know what? A lot of survivors, a lot of victims do that, and we all say, I said it, I want to get back to being me. And you're right, though, I have reinvented myself, because the me that existed before all of this was the me that that lived in it and allowed it. It's not there's no fault or victim blaming here, because abusers cause abuse, rapists cause rape. There's nothing that I did that caused my abuse, but there are definitely ways of thinking and living that can protect me from it in the future. So my Claire 2.0 is a whole. I've got all the best bits of the previous me, and none of the self-sabotaging, self-harming, damaging stuff. And it is just this whole new being of what I'm doing now, I'm seeing the results for other survivors and the project and the conference later this year and everything else. Do you know what? I'm super proud is what I am. I am really, really proud of myself. And I used to cringe thinking about saying that. I used to cringe hearing people go on about how well they'd done and stuff, because I used to think they were being arrogant. But I am not arrogant. I am honouring the fact that I've dragged my ass through what has been a harrowing, long experience, and I have turned the poison that was poured into me into wine, and now I'm drinking it.
I love that.
So it was poured into me my whole life, and I took it, and at first it rotted me to my core, and it nearly killed me. It did nearly kill me, and then I found a way to distill it in a different way, and now here I am, drunk as a fart all day on the wine that was their poison.
And thank God you are. Thank God you have turned it around, and now you can go and have an impact on other people, and so that they can be the same and create this ripple effect. Because we need people like you to share this and to talk about it openly, because we don't talk about it enough and support women enough. And just by sharing your story, somebody might be listening that is going through something similar, and that has an impact on somebody. So I think it's amazing that you're out there doing it. So tell me about the conference, because that's exciting. So that's something that's coming up soon, isn't it?
So excited. So the conference, I am holding the Clear Path Conference UK 2021 in September, on September the 30th this year. So last year, as we all know, there was a pandemic on, still is, just in case anyone's missed it, I'll just point that out. And a lot of awareness and amazing empowering events that normally go on every year have just disappeared because they had to. Lots of things, not just these. And the thing is, it was at a time when especially domestic abuse and abuse towards children in the home, because they're in homes being abused as well, actually escalated extremely, because the people that were perpetrating it were stuck at home with them. So the government and the news and everyone was telling us that all of this stuff had escalated and there was a bigger need. And at the same time, the events and the organisations that raise awareness and help these situations were having to shrink. And then at the same time, the government decided to take away £138 million worth of funding in October. So I went, no. And then I wasn't happy with it when I discovered that in October. And then it wasn't until February this year that I had this idea. And I thought there needs to be a new event. Wouldn't it be incredible if there was an event that was the story of survivorship from childhood? Because there is a big link between childhood emotional trauma and adult domestic abuse survivors and victims. There is definite scientific evidence to say that is a path that is almost unavoidable, and what I wanted was to have a story through the voices of various different incredible survivors who have now gone on to really live their dreams and live an amazing empowered life, to talk about from childhood all the way through to being love bombed and encapsulated and tricked by an abuser, to living with one, safe escape plans, Asian taboos in the Asian community, reporting with the police, mental health support. And I wanted the whole process to be put into one event through the different voices of survivors. And that's what it is. We have the incredible Caroline Strawson from the You Are Enough Foundation headlining, and we have Sam Billingham from DAS and it's the Domestic Abuse Support Service. We have Natalie Page from the Court Said, which is the Court Said is a incredible group it's a charity that supports women through family court against abusers, because that situation is something that nobody's talking about and it needs some shiny light on it. And we've got a woman called Charissa Cook, who's an amazing influencer on TikTok and Instagram, talking about she found her faith through healing, and but she also found a lot wrong with people with faith and the organisations around it and the abuse that happened there. But everyone speaking now, having been through all of these stories of like I say, being poured poison into them, let's call it that, they are now CEOs and founders and qualified psychologists and successful publishing house owners and all of that. And we've even got songwriters that have been working really hard to put some songs together for the conference, some of which are based on my poems. So
amazing.
And it's going to be an event to educate, inspire and empower, because we're going to be inviting a lot of different kinds of people, including MPs and judges.
Wow.
Come along, and it'll be end of June. Tickets will be going on sale.
So how can people find you, Claire? What's your website address?
It is clearpathconference.org, and there you can find all the information about the raffle prizes that are available when you buy a ticket. And the other thing is we're making sure that the ticket prices are super reasonable, because yes, a full day event we can charge 150 quid, but that excludes survivors. So we're making sure that survivors are included in this and can attend and take advantage of all the incredible resources on the day. So clearpathconference.org.
Well, you're a powerhouse, Claire. You really are. And, look at you go now. I can see how you are going to have such an impact, from now on in such a positive way. And I hope that continues part of your healing journey through this as well, because I'm guessing it's never ending, is it? It's not just going to stop. You're always going to be working on it.
I'm definitely not pretending to be the Messiah. I'm not magically fixed, but the cornerstones that I work with and the things that I share and the awareness that I bring, it's supposed to just make it easier. Nobody should be alone in the dark feeling like they're the only one and that they're lost and there's no way out. No one. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually in talks with the therapy group at the minute to try and get the 4 cornerstones, the Clear Path project, into a PDF so that it can be sent out to people on the waiting list for mental health.
That'd be a really good resource. And
all that. So there's so much to it. I could go on all day.
I'll keep doing it. How can people find you on social media, Claire, to follow you?
I'm under Claire Louise Chamberlain. I'm the only one, as far as I can tell, on social media. So Claire Louise Chamberlain on Facebook. I'm on Insta. I'm on TikTok, sharing my 1-minute wisdoms. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, obviously, for the business side of things. I'm not on Twitter at the minute because I don't want to repeat what I'm saying. I don't want to use the same stuff on it. I try and vary up what I'm doing, and I only have a finite amount of time. So not on Twitter right now, but I'd probably need to be. If anybody would like to come and find me, I'm at Chamberlain Expressions or Claire Louise Chamberlain.
Thank you so much. I could chat to you for so much longer, but it's been fantastic to talk to you, and keep doing what you're doing. And I just wish you all the very best for the future. And thank you so much for your honesty and your openness, because I really think you're making such a big impact, and I know you will continue to do so. My last question that I ask all my guests, Claire, because I really want to encourage women to be kinder to themselves. So if you were to pay yourself a compliment, what would it be?
It would be that I am powerful.
Love it. Yes, you are. Well, I'm sending you lots of love, but absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me on and giving me the opportunity to help get the word out there. I can't thank you enough. I'm incredibly grateful, and I'm incredibly grateful to know you as well.
Yes, lovely to connect. Really am. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
So much.
Pleasure. Thank you. Take care. And I can't thank Claire enough for sharing some of her story, and the fact that she's healing and she's overcoming such traumas, but also going on to help other people is so inspiring. And I know that she's going to create such a big impact on people that need it. So I hope if somebody is listening out there that they can reach out and ask for help and find a friend, or if not, go and contact Claire, because I know she's got so many great resources that she'll be able to help you. So thank you, Claire, for such honesty. This is why I love doing the podcast and sharing all these inspiring women, because there's so many of us out there doing amazing things. So I'll be back next week with another dose of inspiration. But in the meantime, keep being fabulous.